Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Since Sunday, 8 p.m. Paris time, France has a new president. Socialist François Hollande ousted the incumbent Nicolas Sarkozy, the conservative president who had made his imprint on France's foreign policy. And the question is whether François Hollande will change France's foreign policy, and if so, in what direction. To try to figure out where François Hollande is heading and how the world will receive him, we'll ask questions to Charles KUPCHAN, who is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also a professor of international affairs at Georgetown University. And last but not least, he was director of European affairs at the White House under Bill Clinton. He joins us via satellite from Washington. Welcome to the France 24 interview.
My pleasure.
Let me begin with the immediate concern here in France, which is the relationship with Germany. During the campaign, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel refused to meet with François Hollande and threw her support behind the conservative president Nicolas Sarkozy. Now, the word is that François Hollande will immediately, after he takes power, fly to Berlin and have a meeting with Chancellor Angela Merkel. How important is it for François Hollande to get along with Angela Merkel?
Well, it's critical, and the Franco-German engine is still the most important coupling of Europe. It gives Europe momentum, it gives Europe direction. And I think it's safe to say that Merkel and Sarkozy were not all that close. On a personal level, there was not a great deal of affinity, but I think Sarkozy more or less went along with Merkel when it came to her insistence on austerity. What I think the all eyes will be on in the coming days is not just the relationship between Hollande and Merkel, but the question of, is Merkel going to budge? Will she be ready to offset her focus on austerity with some new measures that will be focused upon stimulus and growth? Europe's center of gravity is clearly shifting on this issue because of elections. Hollande will have support from the Greeks, from the Italians, from the Spanish, from the Dutch. And the question is Merkel going to see this shift in the center of gravity and ultimately be willing to compromise with Hollande on the question of growth?
So you seem to be saying that the wind is blowing in favor of François Hollande. That's what he's basically indicated on the campaign trail in recent days, and clearly since he won the election on Sunday night in France. Do you think he can really twist Angela Merkel's arm? Angela Merkel says, okay, austerity might not be enough, but it is the condition for growth. François Hollande seems to be saying, well, we need to change our attitude and make sure all European countries don't follow the recipes Greece has been forced to swallow.
You know, I think that the devil will be in the details. And that is to say that there's no question that Hollande is going to try to change course. He has told his electorate that he will focus on stimulus, he will try to get jobs growing, he will try to increase taxation, particularly on the wealthy. And the question is, will he be able to forge enough common ground with Merkel to strike a deal? And there's no question that Merkel has her own red lines. She has been very mindful of domestic politics and of politics within the governing coalition in Germany. She is also facing local elections that are probably going to deal her own political strength a blow. And so I think the issue will be finding the actual policies that she can live with and that he can live with. I doubt she's going to reopen the fiscal pact, but perhaps she and Hollande can agree on new loans, on certain kinds of growth-inducing policies to go alongside the fiscal pact. And I think that's the way to get both Hollande and Merkel to yes.
The one question is how long it will take for François Hollande to get used to negotiate with Angela Merkel, with other European leaders, because many here fear that the crisis is far from over and may actually restart. We might have a political crisis in Greece, for instance, and so Hollande's leadership skills and negotiating skills might be tested earlier than he thinks.
I think that's exactly right. I would say that Hollande has about 1 hour of breathing room to get ready, partly because, as you said, there may be a new financial crisis in Greece. He's got a G8 summit and also a NATO summit coming up in just a couple of weeks here in the United States. So he has very little time to get going. He's been in politics for a long, long time, but usually behind the scenes. He has not been at the ministerial level, so he just does have a steep learning curve. But I do think that he has his work cut out for him, not just in terms of negotiating with Merkel and others, but in terms of French politics itself, because he's going to have to tread the very fine line between doing enough to convince voters, and particularly the Socialist Party base, that he's sticking to his campaign promises, but not so much that the financial markets say, look out, French debt is rising, state spending is rising, France could be the next ground zero for a new fiscal crisis within the EU.
I want to turn to the United States. You rightly pointed out that there are two important summits coming up very soon. Hollande will become officially France's president on May 15th, and then on May 18th and 19th there is a G8 summit in Camp David, followed by a NATO summit in Chicago on the 20th and the 21st. And Barack Obama called François Hollande and invited him for a visit to the White House on the sidelines of those two summits. And so one big question is how will Hollande behave in those summits? And there's especially one question that might be at the forefront, is how do you get out of Afghanistan?
Right. Well, I think that the view here in Washington is one of cautious optimism. Obama has always wanted Europe to focus less on austerity and to do more for growth, in part because if you get growth in Europe, it will wash across the Atlantic, help growth here, and that will improve Obama's chances for re-election. So he's definitely going to be supportive of Hollande's general message. I think the fear is either that Hollande and Merkel can't strike a deal, in which case you have paralysis, or that Hollande's policies are a bit too aggressive and you have a financial crisis. On the security front, Hollande did talk in the campaign about getting out of Afghanistan in 2012. He did talk about rethinking France's reintegration into NATO. But I think he has very little room for maneuver on most foreign policy issues. And I also think that during the Sarkozy era, the undercurrent of anti-Americanism, of Gaullism, let's stand up to Washington, that's basically gone. So I really don't expect to see any serious confrontations between Washington and Paris when it comes to foreign policy. And I think Hollande will be under an enormous amount of pressure at the NATO summit in Chicago to stick to a common game plan in Afghanistan and to follow the rule of thumb that says in together, out together when it comes to NATO missions.
Well, but let me ask you on this. NATO and the United States says the exit strategy is for 2014. Nicolas Sarkozy had already said it's 2013. François Hollande says it's this year. So there could be some controversies and some disagreements on this issue.
You know, I think the decisive moment in this debate occurred last week when Obama went to Kabul and he effectively said, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. We are now in the process of handing things over to the Afghanis, and it's going to play itself out over the next couple of years. That is music to the ears of governments across Europe because they face mounting pressure to get out of Afghanistan. So even though Hollande said out in 2012, Sarkozy said out in 2013, so, Obama says out in 2014, I think they will find a way of compromising. And it may be that some French troops come out in 2012. It may be that their mission shrinks so that they are less in harm's way. But I really don't expect it to be that difficult for the French, the U.S., and others to get a common game plan at the Chicago summit in 2 weeks' time.
Just to finish, let me quickly turn to the Middle East. Do you expect France's stance on the Israeli-Palestinian issue or Iran's nuclear file to change with Hollande, or do you think it will be a similar line to Nicolas Sarkozy's, who's generally been rather favorable to Israel on French standards?
You know, I think there you may see some change. I wouldn't call it a fundamental shift in direction as much as a change in emphasis. Sarkozy was very close to the United States when it came to Israel and Iran. He took the lead in the intervention in Libya. I think that the French left will be somewhat more hesitant to get out in front on these issues, will be somewhat less supportive of Israel, less willing to talk about the use of force against Iran. And in that respect, I think what we can expect is a Paris that is a little bit quieter, a little bit more following rather than leading on some of these key issues. But again, I don't expect a fundamental rift with Washington as much as a readjustment of the Paris-Washington dialogue on Middle East policy.
Charles KUPCHAN, thank you very much. We'll have to see how François Hollande fares on the world stage. You'll be watching him when he comes to the United States very soon. I want to thank you. And thank you for watching this edition of the France 24 interview here on France 24.